There is a moment in every life when the noise fades, when the distractions lose their grip, and what remains is unmistakably you, standing alone with your thoughts, your choices, and the consequences of everything you have done so far. Most people fear this moment, not because it is dangerous, but because it is honest. In silence, there is no applause to hide behind, no crowd to dilute responsibility, and no external validation to confuse direction with purpose. And yet, in Stoic philosophy, this is not a curse. It is the beginning of strength. To embrace being alone is not to withdraw from life, nor is it to reject people. It is to stop depending on them for your stability. It is to stop outsourcing your emotional foundation to things you cannot control. The Stoics understood something that modern attention-driven life has made people forget. Solitude does not weaken you, it reveals you. And what it reveals will either unsettle you or liberate you, depending on how honest you are willing to be. Most suffering that people associate with loneliness does not come from being physically alone. It comes from resisting it. It comes from the belief that without constant interaction, constant approval, and constant distraction, something essential is missing. But Stoicism begins with a different premise entirely. You are already complete in your capacity to choose how you think, how you respond, and how you act. Everything else is secondary. Everything else can be taken away without touching your character. This is the foundation of the Stoic discipline known as the dichotomy of control. Some things belong to you and everything else does not. Your judgments, your intentions, your responses, and your moral direction are yours. Everything outside of that, reputation, outcomes, praise, rejection, timing, even the presence or absence of other people is not. When you truly internalize this, solitude stops being something to avoid. It becomes something to refine your awareness. In solitude, your mind stops performing for others. And when it stops performing, it begins to speak truthfully. You start to notice the impulses you usually suppress, the fears you usually disguise, and the inconsistencies you usually outrun with distraction. This is why most people never sit alone for too long without reaching for noise. Not because silence is empty, but because it is full of uncomfortable clarity. Marcus Aurelius understood this while ruling the Roman Empire, surrounded by politics, war, and the constant demands of power. Despite having every reason to remain externally occupied, he carved out time for inward separation. His writings, later known as meditations, were not written for an audience. They were written in isolation as a form of self-correction. He reminded himself repeatedly that the opinions of others cannot define him, that external praise is irrelevant to the discipline of the mind, and that even an emperor is still accountable to his own reasoning. He was not alone in a physical sense, but he cultivated an inner solitude that no crowd could interrupt. Epictetus began in a very different place, as a slave with no control over his body, his possessions, or his external conditions. And yet he taught that true freedom begins exactly where external control ends. If you cannot control what happens to you, then you must refine what happens within you. In that sense, solitude is not about geography. It is about mental independence. A person can be surrounded by thousands and still be enslaved internally. Another can be physically isolated and yet completely free. Seneca, too, spoke of retreat not as escape, but as restoration. He warned against a constant exposure to crowds and opinions, not because people are inherently harmful, but because unfiltered influence erodes clarity. When you are always reacting to others, you stop hearing yourself. And when you stop hearing yourself, you become dependent on external direction. The Stoic answer to this is not isolation for its own sake, but strategic withdrawal to regain authority over your own mind. This is where most people misunderstand solitude. They assume it is passive. In reality, Stoic solitude is active discipline. It is not the absence of engagement. It is the removal of interference. It is the deliberate act of separating your thoughts from the pressure of approval, comparison, and reaction. Without this separation, your identity becomes unstable. You shift depending on who is watching. You adjust depending on what is rewarded. And slowly, without noticing, you lose contact with your own judgment. There is a deeper layer to this. When you are constantly available, constantly responsive, and constantly visible, you become predictable. And predictability weakens authority over your own life. Strategic silence, on the other hand, restores that authority. When you stop explaining yourself unnecessarily, when you stop reacting to every provocation, when you stop revealing every intention prematurely, you reclaim something most people give away without realizing it: control over your narrative. The Stoics were not silent because they lacked opinions. They were silent because they understood the cost of unnecessary speech. Every reaction exposes a piece of your internal state. Every impulsive response gives others leverage over your emotions. Silence, when used correctly, is not absence. It is precision. It is the discipline of only revealing what is necessary for action, not validation. But solitude does something even more important than this. It forces confrontation with weakness. In social environments, it is easy to delay discipline. There is always another conversation, another distraction, another justification. Alone, there is no delay. Either you act in alignment with your principles, or you witness the gap between your ideals and your behavior without interruption. This is why radical self-discipline begins in solitude. Not because solitude is comfortable, but because it is uncompromising. In that uncompromising space, you begin to see how much of your energy is wasted on emotional reaction. You see how quickly your focus dissolves when external validation is removed. And if you are honest, you begin to understand that your dependence on stimulation is not strength, but fragmentation. The Stoic goal is not to eliminate desire or emotion, but to refine your relationship with them until they no longer govern your decisions. Immunity to criticism is born in this same environment. When you are alone long enough, you begin to notice something important. Most of the voices you fear are not even present. They exist only in anticipation. You imagine judgment, you simulate rejection, you rehearse embarrassment. But none of these things are happening in reality. They are projections. Solitude strips away the illusion of constant observation and reveals that much of your fear is self-generated. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if you are troubled by anything external, the pain is not caused by the thing itself, but by your judgment of it. In solitude, you are forced to see how often you judge yourself before anyone else has the chance. You become both critic and accused. And once you recognize this, you gain the ability to stop the internal trial before it begins. This is also where transformation begins. Adversity, when seen through the Stoic lens, is not an interruption of progress. It is the material of progress. When you are alone with difficulty, without distraction or escape, you begin to reshape your interpretation of it. Instead of asking why this is happening, you begin to ask what this requires of you. That shift is subtle, but it is the difference between resistance and growth. Amor fati. The acceptance and embrace of fate is not passive resignation. It is active alignment with reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. In solitude, this becomes practical rather than theoretical. You are no longer negotiating with external opinions. You are working directly with reality, unfiltered and unmodified. And in that direct engagement, your character becomes visible to you without distortion. Still, there is a tension that must be acknowledged. Solitude is not a permanent retreat. It is a training ground. If you misunderstand it, you will use it to avoid life rather than strengthen yourself for it. The Stoic does not disappear to escape responsibility. The Stoic withdraws to remove noise so that responsibility can be faced with clarity. The goal is not distance from life, but mastery within it. What most people call loneliness is often just an undeveloped relationship with their own mind. They have not learned how to sit with their thoughts without distraction. They have not trained themselves to remain steady without external reinforcement. And so they interpret absence of stimulation as absence of meaning. Stoicism rejects this interpretation entirely. Meaning is not added from outside. It is constructed through how you respond to what is already present. If you remain in this discipline long enough, something begins to shift. Silence becomes less threatening. Solitude becomes less heavy, and your attention stops scattering outward so easily. You start to notice that your internal world is not something to escape from, but something to refine. And with that realization, the entire structure of dependence begins to weaken. But there is a deeper stage still, one that most people never reach, where solitude stops being an environment and becomes a state of mind that you carry even in the presence of others. This is where Stoic independence becomes complete. Not separation from people, but independence from needing them to validate your internal stability. And that is where everything changes. That is where strength stops being theoretical and becomes irreversible. And yet, reaching that point requires passing through something most people avoid at all costs. Complete honesty and silence, without distraction, without approval, and without escape. What you discover there is not always comfortable, but it is the only place where transformation is real, and where the foundation of unshakable character is built. Once you stop running from solitude, the next realization is far more demanding than anything you have faced so far. It is not that being alone makes you strong. It is that being alone exposes whether you were ever strong to begin with. Most people assume strength is built in action, in visibility, in achievement. Stoicism cuts through that illusion. Real strength is not what you display when everything is going well. It is what remains when there is nothing external left to support you. When no one is watching, when no one is reacting, when nothing is rewarding your effort immediately, what continues to function is your character. Everything else is decoration. This is where radical self-discipline becomes unavoidable. In solitude, you cannot outsource your weakness. There is no audience to perform for, no social momentum to carry you, no emotional validation to stabilize your effort. Either you act according to principle or you drift, and the mind, left unchecked, always drifts toward comfort. Not because it is broken, but because it is efficient. Discipline is not natural. It is constructed through repeated resistance against that drift. The Stoics understood this clearly. Epictetus did not teach discipline as motivation. He taught it as structure. You do not wait to feel ready. You act according to what is rational, regardless of internal resistance. In solitude, this principle becomes visible in its purest form. If you say you value focus but cannot maintain it when alone, then your value is not focus. It is convenience disguised as intention. And this is where most self-deception collapses. Alone, there is no social friction to blur the truth. You either do the work or you do not. You either control your impulses or you obey them. You either build or you consume. There is no middle layer where you can pretend otherwise. This is also where your relationship with criticism begins to transform at a deeper level. When you are constantly engaged with others, criticism feels like an external threat. In solitude, you begin to see something more accurate. Most criticism only hurts because you have already accepted it internally before anyone else voiced it. The real battle is not against external judgment. It is against your own unexamined agreement with it. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly returned to this idea. The mind harms itself more than the world ever could. In isolation, you start to witness this directly. A single thought can destabilize you more than 1,000 external events. Not because the thought is powerful, but because you have not learned to observe it without identification. Stoicism trains you to separate thought from truth, impulse from action, reaction from judgment. When that separation becomes clearer, criticism loses its authority. Not because you become arrogant, but because you become precise. You stop treating every opinion as a verdict. You start filtering input through reason instead of emotion. And slowly, the emotional weight of approval and disapproval begins to dissolve. But there is a harder truth beneath this. Solitude will reveal not only your weaknesses, but your dependencies. The need to be seen, the need to be affirmed, the need to feel important in the eyes of others. These are not minor preferences. They are structural dependencies that shape behavior more than most people are willing to admit. And here is where Stoicism becomes uncomfortable. It does not ask you to suppress these dependencies. It asks you to outgrow them. That process is not gentle. It requires repeated exposure to situations where nothing external confirms your value, and yet you act as if your value is already established. This is the essence of internal authority. You do not wait for recognition. You operate from principle. Seneca warned about the danger of living in constant visibility. A life shaped entirely by external perception becomes fragile because it is always reactive. You are never initiating your life. You are responding to it. Solitude interrupts that pattern. It forces initiation. You decide the direction without consulting the crowd. And when you do that long enough, something subtle shifts. You stop negotiating with distraction. You stop explaining your focus. You stop justifying your silence. You begin to treat your attention as something valuable enough to protect rather than something to distribute freely. This is strategic scarcity applied to the mind. Not withholding for attention, but withholding for clarity. Silence, in this sense, becomes a form of power that is easily misunderstood. It is not withdrawal from responsibility. It is removal of interference so that responsibility can be handled without distortion. Every unnecessary reaction is a fragment of attention lost. Every unfiltered response is a piece of control surrendered. The Stoic does not aim to be silent for appearance. The Stoic becomes selective because clarity demands it. Over time, this selectivity begins to reshape identity itself. You are no longer defined by how often you respond, but by how precisely you act. You are no longer measured by visibility, but by consistency. And consistency only survives in solitude long enough to become internalized. Without external pressure, most people collapse into inconsistency. With discipline, solitude becomes the environment where consistency is forged. There is another layer here that must not be ignored. Solitude will not automatically make you better. It will amplify whatever already exists. If you are undisciplined, solitude will expose and reinforce that lack of structure. If you are focused, it will deepen that focus. This is why Stoics never romanticized isolation. They treated it as a test of internal order, not a source of automatic growth. That means the real question is not whether you can be alone. It is what kind of mind you bring in to solitude. If your attention is chaotic, solitude will make it visible. If your emotions are unregulated, solitude will intensify their presence. If your habits are weak, solitude will remove the distractions that normally hide them. There is no neutrality here, only amplification. And yet, if you persist through that amplification instead of escaping it, something rare begins to form. You develop a stable internal reference point. You stop measuring yourself against the immediate environment. You start measuring yourself against principle. That is the shift from reactive living to deliberate living. Over time, this selectivity begins to reshape identity itself. You are no longer defined by how often you respond, but by how precisely you act. You are no longer measured by visibility, but by consistency. And consistency only survives in solitude long enough to become internalized. Without external pressure, most people collapse into inconsistency. With discipline, solitude becomes the environment where consistency is forged. There is another layer here that must not be ignored. Solitude will not automatically make you better. It will amplify whatever already exists. If you are undisciplined, solitude will expose and reinforce that lack of structure. If you are focused, it will deepen that focus. This is why Stoics never romanticized isolation. They treated it as a test of internal order, not a source of automatic growth. That means the real question is not whether you can be alone. It is what kind of mind you bring into solitude. If your attention is chaotic, solitude will make it visible. If your emotions are unregulated, solitude will intensify their presence. If your habits are weak, solitude will remove the distractions that normally hide them. There is no neutrality here, only amplification. And yet, if you persist through that amplification, instead of escaping it, something rare begins to form. You develop a stable internal reference point. You stop measuring yourself against the immediate environment. You start measuring yourself against principle. And that is the shift from reactive living to deliberate living. At that stage, external events still matter, but they no longer define direction. Praise becomes irrelevant. Criticism becomes informational rather than emotional. Success becomes something you refine, not something that defines you. Failure becomes data, not identity. This is the Stoic transformation in practice, not detachment from reality, but detachment from distortion. Eventually, even the concept of being alone begins to lose its emotional charge. Because what you were really dependent on was not other people themselves, but the illusion that you needed constant reflection from them to remain stable. Once that illusion breaks, solitude is no longer emptiness. It is simply space. Space to think clearly. Space to act deliberately. Space to exist without distortion. And here is the final reversal that Stoicism demands you confront. If you cannot stand being alone with yourself, then you are not avoiding loneliness. You are avoiding truth. Because in solitude there is nowhere else to look except inward. And what you find there is either discipline or disorder. Nothing in between survives for long without external support. So the question is not whether solitude is difficult. It is whether you are willing to become the kind of person who no longer needs distraction to tolerate their own mind. Because once that threshold is crossed, you are no longer dependent on the world to define your stability. You become the source of it. And that is where Stoicism stops being philosophy and becomes identity. The rest is just repetition of that choice, made daily, in silence, without witnesses, until it no longer feels like effort at all, but like nature itself.